Our story takes place in the city of Ebelstein, a place with a very medieval look. There lives an elderly man known to everyone as the Proud Old Man. Despite his name, he could only use one star magic and lived in the poor districts. The old man claimed to be an archmage, but was always irritated, and would even argue with children who were playing around. At that moment, a boy with white hair and red eyes was watching the grumpy old man. This young man then reveals that he learned to use magic from that old man. Apparently, there was no big reason for the boy to have become his apprentice. The old man just needed a follower to stroke his ego. Meanwhile, the young man needed knowledge to become stronger. The seasons then passed, and the boy's training continued without stopping. One day, the master watched his student practice. With a blue aura around him, the white-haired boy concentrated and released a large amount of mana. Surprised by this, the old man wondered if the boy had already understood the flow of mana. With his red eyes shining brightly, the protagonist showed an absurd amount of talent. He then extended his hand and created a powerful blue light with his energy. Right after, the boy cast a spell that took the form of a sword of light. The attack flew quickly and hit a wooden wall head on. After the powerful spell, the young man was exhausted while his master watched him. The old man was shocked by what he saw and broke into a cold sweat. Even while doing chores for the old man, our protagonist remained determined to learn. Even with his talent, the young man became a one-star mage in just 1 year of training. But the old man said that was nothing, as nobles reach 3 stars before coming of age. He said that a commoner like the boy would never reach that level and would give up at 2 stars. The master always said that bloodline was everything and that the boy's effort was useless. At this, the protagonist wondered if the old man said that out of envy for things he couldn't achieve. That night, the boy stayed by his master's side near the campfire for a long time. The next day, a heavy rain began to fall nonstop over the city, and when the young man returned home, he found his master lifeless on the floor. The old man's body was covered in bruises, so he had clearly been attacked. Initially, he thought the old man had gotten into a fight somewhere and ended up on the losing end. But later, the boy discovered that his master had actually been attacked by the guards. With that, the young man buried the old man's body in a shallow grave with a wooden cross. Apparently, the master was caught trying to take a 2-star magic book from the warehouse. He didn't understand why the old man would do that, and at that moment, a blue screen appeared. That old man who talked so much about noble bloodlines ended up doing something unthinkable. The system said he had mastered the basics and could now choose his primary school of magic. 4 years passed, and the boy revealed that he wasn't actually from that world. During that time, he met a very skilled woman named Katia Flameheart. She was from a bankrupt noble family and a 3-star mage wanted by mercenaries. So she started working for a company and taught the young boy magic. Our protagonist learned many things from Katia, who was a 3-star mage. One day, they were talking in a tavern called Beldern's Tears. The woman said it's natural for a mage to have ambitions and that the young man named Derek has talent. But she warned him that excessive greed would only delay his achievements in the future. The white-haired protagonist agreed with his master and said he would remember that. Then the mage asked her student to close his eyes and concentrate to feel the mana. She instructed him to feel the origin and flow of the energy and to manifest whatever he imagined. With that, the boy obeyed his teacher and released a powerful blue aura from his body. The master realized he had an absurd amount of mana and very stable control. At that moment, the boy's eyes glowed a shade of purple as the energy flowed. The woman was impressed by the amount of power he was releasing at once. Suddenly, a large explosion occurred outside the tavern, startling everyone. The people inside panicked and wondered what was happening. The boy was also startled by the commotion and looked at his hands, not understanding anything. Seeing this, his master quickly grabbed his hand to try to calm him down. She then told the young man not to say anything and to just follow her out of the place. Outside, some guards were gathering because they heard the loud explosion coming from there. The mage then led her student through an alley to avoid meeting the city soldiers. The young man continued to follow the woman, not understanding what had just happened. At that moment, she stopped and told the boy to listen carefully to what she was about to say. The boy agreed and waited attentively for his master's words. The woman explained that nobles are sensitive about their privileges, and magic is the greatest of them all. She continued, saying that innate power is a blessing only for the nobility, and the few commoners who reach that level dedicate their entire lives to it. With that, the mage revealed that he had used a 2-star illusion spell called auditory hallucination. So at 14 years old, he became a 2-star mage, and the system confirmed his new skill. After that, Katya continued to teach him various spells and tell him about high society. A year passed, and the woman had to leave, leaving the young man behind. Apparently, Count Elvester's family had appointed her as a private tutor. This was an offer that the mage simply could not refuse. Being a magic teacher for a noble family of that caliber was a blessing for anyone. As a farewell gift, she left a 2-star magic book for the boy. The protagonist then took the book his master gave him and began to study on his own. A year later, he learned 2 more 2-star spells on his own. With a determined look, the young man showed that he wasn't going to stop there. At 16 years old, he had no intention of stopping, and a man called out to him in the tavern. The man asked the boy what kind of job he was looking for. He then revealed that it was a request from the family of Grand Duke Duplain. The young man was surprised and wondered why such an important family would seek them out. But the man said the important thing is that the Duplain family spends gold like it's water. He said that if they could get a connection with them, they would have more opportunities in the future. The young man then asked what they wanted the company to do. The man replied that they just needed to hunt some monsters on the outskirts of the Grand Duchy. Our protagonist found that very suspicious and became thoughtful about the job. With that, he refused to do the job, and the man shouted for him to wait. The white-haired boy said he doesn't do suspicious jobs and to call someone else, but the guild master complained that they needed a mage and that they are rare nowadays. The young man still wondered why they would need a mage to hunt a few monsters. The white-haired boy then turned around, annoyed by his boss's insistence. To convince him, the man offered a gold coin as an initial payment. Upon seeing the money, the young man seemed to reconsider his boss's proposal. At that moment, a gentleman with a monocle and a mustache appeared on the scene. With him were 2 women, an older one and a hooded one. The guild master then introduced the boy to his new clients, but the old man said that a child who hasn't even had his coming-of-age ceremony is no good. The boss tried to defend the young man, saying he is the most skilled mage he knows. Ignoring the man, the old man said they should leave because he wouldn't entrust the mission to a child. With that, the clients turned and started walking toward the tavern's exit. However, the hooded woman seemed to have other plans and looked back. She then approached the white-haired boy and called him over for a chat. They then departed for the Grand Duchy of Duplain to begin the mission. There, the young man began to face the goblins using his powerful magic. With his red eyes shining, he showed his determination in combat. He defeated the monsters with ease, and without showing any mercy, one of the goblins tried to attack the boy from behind with a makeshift axe. But the green creature's attack was no match for the young man's speed. With a cold look, the protagonist finished off the last monster of the horde. Afterward, he used an electric spell to take care of the monsters of bodies. With everything finished, the young man informed the official that the job was done. The old man and the woman observed the scene without showing much surprise. The hooded girl then commented that he dealt with all of them very quickly. Back at the tavern, the white-haired boy met a fellow guild member. The blonde girl accused him of having become the noble's little dog. She yelled that even though they were commoners, they shouldn't lower themselves for the nobility. The young woman then asked how much they paid him to throw away his pride. The guild master held up one finger, and the girl got angry, thinking it was 1 silver coin. But with a mischievous smile, the man revealed that she was mistaken. He then said that it was actually 1 gold coin, and the girl was shocked. With that, the young woman begged for them to let her grovel before them too. That night, the young mercenary reflected on the day's events. The girl who caused the scene was now passed out while the boss asked about the job. The white-haired young man replied that it was no big deal, and he just hunted some goblins. But the boy then revealed that the 3 clients were actually lying about everything. Surprised by the revelation, the guild master didn't understand the situation. He explained that a noble official should have youth and social skills, but the old man had neither, and the woman who claimed to be a maid had hands that were too clean for someone who does heavy labor. When he was about to talk about the inspector's apprentice, his boss interrupted him by calling his name. The young man then looked at his superior with a serious expression on his face. The man said that they are mercenaries and just need to do the job and get the money. Although suspicious, the boy agreed with his boss's words and accepted the situation. The boss finished by saying that in the wild, only survival matters and the rest is worthless. The next day, they returned to the Grand Duchy of Duplain to finish the job. The young man informed the clients that the area was clear and the goblins wouldn't be back for a while. With the job done, the guild master asked the old man about the final payment. At this, the client handed over 2 shiny gold coins as a reward for the service. The man got excited about the money and showed the 2 gold coins to the boy. Seeing that scene, the man with the monocle cleared his throat to get their attention. He said that he greatly values the young man's skills, and would like to make a new request. The guild master then jumped into the conversation and asked what he wanted with his subordinate. The man revealed that the Grand Duke was offering 15 gold coins for the job, leaving everyone shocked. The man with the monocle then asked if the young man would accept the new mission. Without hesitating for a second, the white-haired boy agreed to the proposal. With that, they took a carriage and departed for the Grand Duke's residence. Soon they arrived at the Duplain family mansion, a giant and luxurious place. The guild master was impressed by the size of the noble residence. Before they entered, the old man said he needed to formally introduce himself to them. He revealed that his name is Dellin, and he is the head butler of the estate. The guild master became nervous, not knowing what to do in that situation. Next, the older woman introduced herself as Katarina, the head housekeeper. Embarrassed, Jaden introduced himself as the leader of the Beldern mercenary company. The young man thought that he had expected this, but their positions were quite high. At that moment, the hooded girl, who had been quiet, began to move. Seeing this, the guild master wondered who that last person could be. The mysterious woman then removed her hood, revealing her face to everyone. Her long, dark hair swayed in the wind as she revealed herself. The protagonist watched the blue-eyed girl with a serious expression. She introduced herself as Azilin and said she wants to appoint the boy as her sister's tutor. The young man was shocked by the proposal and wondered if he had heard correctly. Inside the Duplain residence, a young man throws the door open and enters the office. He then storms into the office and yells at his father, named Valerian. The boy rushes in, catching the attention of his father and his blonde brother. The Grand Duke then tells his son Raig to carry himself with dignity in his presence. Annoyed, the young man says that the one who needs dignity is Diala, as he supports a maid. The young woman is crying desperately because this Diala person went too far and harmed her. The blonde brother then tells Raig to be quiet because they were in the middle of a conversation, but the young man ignores him and says that more than 10 servants have quit in the last month. He then asks how long his father will continue to ignore that troublemaker. The blonde brother stands up, annoyed with Raig's attitude, and shouts his name. Then the light-haired man tells his brother to stop making a scene and to leave. The dark-haired boy is silent for a moment with a serious expression. He says that even if Diala is useless, they still have Isulin for the future. Raig then states it's time to get rid of the troublesome girl, but the Grand Duke calmly takes off his glasses and says that's not his decision to make. The young man reveals that he has already found a monastery for her, and that it would be better for the family. Furious at his son's words, the father forcefully grabs him by the head. In a swift move, the Grand Duke slams Raig's head onto his desk. With a threatening look, the man pins his son against the wooden desk. Even though he's hurt, the young man says that when the time comes, his father will have to decide. The Grand Duke stares at his son with a cold, threatening gaze after the altercation. Meanwhile, Isulin and our protagonist finally arrive in the main room. The girl then asks if the young mage has ever heard of her sister, Diala. With a mysterious smile, she says her sister isn't well known to the public. At that moment, the large office doors open, and they enter the room. Inside, they find Raig with an injured face and his blonde brother. The light-haired man greets Isulin and asks how her stay was. The young woman replies with a smile that she lived comfortably, thanks to his care. Then the older brother says that Raig is hurt, and that they can talk later. With his red eyes, the protagonist observes the whole situation in silence. The blonde man places a cloth on Raig's head to tend to his injury. The white-haired boy continues to analyze the strange dynamic of that family. Then he notices the maid who was with Raig, crying in a corner of the room. The young mercenary becomes thoughtful, trying to understand what is happening there. Back in the office, the Grand Duke says he is happy to know his daughter is well. Isulin thanks him and introduces the boy as Diala's new magic tutor. The family patriarch then puts on his glasses and stares at the white-haired young man. The girl says that since he's busy, they will leave the room now. But before they leave, the Grand Duke tells the new magic tutor to stay behind. The protagonist turns around, not understanding what the nobleman wants to talk to him about. In the office, the atmosphere becomes tense as the Grand Duke and the young man stare at each other. Calmly, the head of the Duplain family begins to write on a piece of parchment at his desk. He then comments that the boy is very young and asks if he is 16 years old. The white-haired protagonist confirms his age to the nobleman with a simple yes. The man asks about his skills, and the young man says he uses 1-star magic. With a smirk, the Grand Duke starts to laugh at the boy's answer. He says that humility isn't always a virtue, and that he knows the young man is lying. Seeing that he's been found out, the white-haired boy just remains silent. Then the nobleman releases his aura and the young man realizes he is a 5-star mage. The mercenary apologizes, but the Lord says he understands, as having too much talent can be a bad thing. The man comments that based on his clothes and age, the young man doesn't look like a magic tutor. Without hesitating, the white-haired boy reveals that he is actually a mercenary. The nobleman says he trusts his daughter's choice and will allow him into the annex. He dismisses him, but the young man interrupts to ask one last question. The Grand Duke then allows the boy to say what he wants to know. The young man says that his duty as a mercenary is to ensure that Lady Diala learns magic. He explains that the mission is to get the girl into high society. The man then asks why the boy is stating the obvious to him. At this, the young man reveals that he actually has a very serious request to make. The Grand Duke is intrigued by the boy's boldness and waits to hear the request. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a plate is thrown forcefully against the floor. At the noise, the maid cries out in shock and cowers in fear. The servant apologizes several times, but the girl treats her with great contempt. The young noble then tells the maid to get lost and threatens her not to show her face again. In another room, the guild master asks Iselin why she chose that boy. He says many tutors would line up for this job, and it would be difficult for a commoner. The young woman reveals that she has already tried the most famous tutors, but they all gave up. She goes on to say that the young man's master was a bankrupt noble, so he learned a lot. Because of this, the girl believed he could guide her sister Diala with kindness. The man then laughs and says that Iselin needs to learn to read people better. He reminds her that the boy grew up on the streets and didn't survive on kindness alone. The young noble is surprised by the man's words and seems to rethink her choice. At that moment, our protagonist is guided down the hallway by a butler. The white-haired young man then approaches a large wooden door in the hallway. With that, he raises his hand to knock on the bedroom door. The boy then knocks twice on the door, waiting for a response from the other side. Receiving no answer, he just stands there silently for a moment. Seeing that no one was going to answer, the young mercenary decides to open the door himself. Upon entering the room, he greets the person sitting inside. He then introduces himself as Derek to the brown-haired girl sitting at the table. The blonde-haired girl, who reveals herself to be Diala, tells the young man to approach. Obeying the order, the white-haired boy walks toward the noblewoman. At that moment, the young woman gives a mischievous smile and seems to have a plan in mind. Suddenly, she throws something in the boy's face, who can't dodge in time. As a result, the young man is completely soaked with dirty, disgusting water. The girl then starts laughing and says she thought a sewer rat had come in. She humiliates him, saying that on second thought, he really does look like a sewer rat. The young noble then grabs a nearby chair to use for support. With it, she climbs onto a small table to be taller than the boy. Then the blonde dumps a bucket of dirty water on the new magic tutor's head. The mercenary just stands there in silence as the water runs down his face. The girl complains that she's out of water and regrets not being able to humiliate him more. But the young man lifts his head and stares at her with a cold, frightening gaze. Seeing that expression, the girl is shocked and speechless for a moment. Annoyed, she tries to kick him, but the boy grabs her leg tightly. The young man then kneels in front of the noblewoman, still holding her foot firmly. The girl gets angry for being touched and insults the white-haired mercenary. She then covers her nose and complains that he stinks because of the dirty water. Despite being humiliated, the young man continues to stare at the noblewoman without showing any emotion. The girl then leans on the table and seems to prepare to continue the humiliation. The noblewoman continues the humiliation and tells the sewer rat to know his place. We then return to the young man's conversation with the Grand Duke in his office. The head of the Duplain family was looking out the window while thinking about the situation. With a serious expression, the older man listened to the mercenary's words. The boy says that Diala's problem is not a simple one and makes a request to the Lord. With his red eyes, he asks how much authority the nobleman will grant him. The Grand Duke then stares at the white-haired young man, analyzing his bold request. Back in the present, the blonde girl's face is red, and she's in shock. Apparently, the young man lost his patience and gave the spoiled noblewoman a firm tap. He then looks down on her with a cold expression and no regrets. Shocked, the girl puts a hand to her face, unable to believe what just happened. With his red eyes glowing, the mercenary tells the young woman to get up. At that moment, he remembers a conversation from 3 years ago with his master. Back then, he had asked Katia what to do with a very stubborn student. The mage replied that she would try to understand and embrace that type of student, but the boy finds the answer too idealistic and asks about the worst cases. The master explains that if communication fails, a different starting point is needed. With a serious look, She reveals that the method is to simply use fear to your advantage. Back in the room, Diallo is still on the floor, completely frightened by his actions. The young man then tells her to treat others with respect and to get up now. The spoiled noble then pushes herself up from the floor to try and stand after the lesson. Full of anger, she throws herself at the young mercenary, trying to fight back. The girl yells that a commoner like him has no right to touch a noblewoman, but the boy loses his patience completely and gives the young woman another tap to quiet her down. He then says he won't have to repeat himself twice for her, either. With a scary smile, the noblewoman seems not to understand what he is saying, so she yells for the butler and accuses the young man of harming a lady of the nobility. At this, the head butler and the maids come running and ask if she is okay. The old man scolds the boy and says the Grand Duke will find out what he did, but unfazed, the white-haired young man just takes out a parchment he was keeping. He reveals that the Grand Duke gave him full authority over the girl's education. The butler takes the document and is shocked to see the family's official seal on the paper. The young noblewoman is also surprised and doesn't understand what is happening. That night, the Deplain mansion seemed calm, but the commotion wasn't over yet. The blonde brother, Valerian, runs through the halls with Reg, who is trying to calm him down. He then bursts into one of the rooms, yelling and calling for the mercenary he hired. Inside, the white-haired young man was calmly reading a book in bed. Valerian yells, asking how he dares to lay a hand on Diala, but Reg holds him back forcefully. Calmly, the tutor replies that it was something permitted by the Grand Duke himself. Reg then tells his brother that their father allowed it, and that he is a guest of Azelin's. Valerian then tells the young man to come with him, and tells Reg to stay out of it. The dark-haired brother says that Diala needed a lesson, and that Valerian won't overdo it. At this, the protagonist watches the two brothers with a serious expression on his face. Reg wonders why his blonde brother protects that hopeless girl so much. In a dark room, a few old dolls are sitting on the floor near the door. Valerian then invites the young man to enter his sister Diala's old room. He explains that this was her room in the main house, and it has been untouched ever since. The white-haired protagonist observes an unfinished painting on an easel. The nobleman reveals that his sister loved to draw and looked adorable showing off her work, but he says that she never finished a drawing and always left a blank space. Valerian apologizes for getting worked up earlier, and the young man tells him not to worry. The mercenary then asks why he brought him to that room full of paintings. The blonde-haired man wanted to show that Diala didn't deserve to be looked down on like that. He says she became obsessed with her bloodline and ended up being sent to the annex. Now Valerian wants to prevent them from sending her to a monastery and picks up some books. With that, the older brother begs the young man to save his sister Diala, but the protagonist notices something in the books and asks the nobleman to wait a moment. He says that based on the notes in the margins, the girl hasn't completely given up on magic. The young man asks if those are books from the School of Regulations, and Valerian confirms. The mercenary becomes thoughtful with the new discovery and seems to have a plan in mind. The young mercenary then observes one of the landscape paintings in the girl's room. With that, he picks up one of the theory books that were there and seems to make a decision. Then he says he's going to try his new plan and hands the book to the noblewoman's brother. That same night, the annex of the Grand Mansion was completely silent and dark. In her room, the young Diala was sleeping peacefully in her bed without noticing anything unusual, but suddenly, a bucket of very cold water is thrown forcefully to wake her up. The girl then wakes up screaming desperately, with the ice-cold water all over her face. The new tutor asks with a cold gaze if she was serious about sleeping. Confused and very annoyed, the noblewoman asks if the mercenary has gone completely crazy. He then grabs her by the arm and says they need to go somewhere important. The boy drags her down the hall as she yells for the servants to stop him under the bright moonlight. The young man takes the noblewoman out of the mansion by force. He drags her along a dirt path, away from the Duplain family residence. Arriving at a secluded spot, the tutor throws her forcefully onto the dirt ground. The girl yells angrily and asks who he thinks he is to dare to teach her. The young man asks if she wants to hear an interesting fact, and she gets confused. With a smile, he reveals that he's not going to teach her magic, and that he just enjoys roughing up nobles. Shocked by the revelation, the girl asks what he just said to her. He continues, saying that being a tutor is just an excuse for his wicked plans. Then the mercenary gets closer and says, it's an excuse to deal with nobles like her. With that, he draws his sword and says the screams of nobles are quite beautiful. The girl then asks, frightened, if he thinks he'll get away with this. With a smile, he says yes, because she's going to a monastery, and no one would believe her. The mercenary says that in the worst-case scenario, he can atone with his life, since a commoner's is worthless. He continues, saying he could just run away, and would be doing the family a favor by getting rid of her. Completely terrified, the young noble thinks she's done for if she gets caught by that man. With that, the blonde-haired girl starts running desperately to escape the danger. She thinks she needs to lose him in the forest, because he would easily catch her in the open field. The young woman knows the forest well and plans to get back home through it, but she ends up tripping. She then thinks that he's the one who's in trouble, but suddenly something catches her attention. A huge fireball appears in the sky, illuminating all the darkness of that night. The white-haired young man then launches the powerful spell in the direction of the forest. Startled, the girl turns around and realizes that it's a fireball spell. The magic tutor holds the sphere of fire with a serious and determined look. With a mischievous smile, the mercenary shows that he's not playing around. At this, the powerful fire magic flies quickly toward the frightened girl. The reflection of the flames shines in the noblewoman's eyes as the attack gets closer. With a scream of terror, the girl is thrown back by the impact of the explosion. A large fiery explosion happens right behind her, destroying everything around. Fallen on the ground and in a total panic, the young noble can barely believe what she saw. With a frightening smile, the mercenary says he missed his shot on purpose. The full moon lit up the night as the chase continued through the dark forest. Because of this, the young noblewoman ran desperately to try and save her own life. On her face, the girl showed a mix of fear and determination to escape, but in a moment of distraction, she ended up tripping over a tree root in her path. From the trip, the blonde girl fell hard onto the dirt ground, unable to protect herself. Fallen and exhausted, she could barely stand and only stared at what was coming toward her. Suddenly, a powerful blue energy arrow appeared and flew at high speed. With a focused look, the magic tutor prepared his next attack without any hesitation. Then, the energy arrow zoomed right past the noblewoman, who was lying on the ground. The young girl was in shock and couldn't react after seeing the magical attack pass so close to her. The mercenary then praised her movements and said it was hard to believe she stayed in the annex. Out of breath, the girl just stared at him in silence, completely confused. Then she stood up and started running back into the forest, while the young man watched her. With a slight smile, the white-haired tutor seemed to have everything under control. The noblewoman wondered how long she would keep running, and if she would ever manage to escape that place. Suddenly, she seemed to have a big realization and stopped running for a moment. Meanwhile, the boy used his magic on a puddle of water along the path. He then observed the trail in the dark forest that the blonde girl was following. The young man confirmed that it was the forest he saw in the paintings, and where she used to play. He understood that she felt the energy of nature, and transferred it into her paintings. With his red eyes glowing, he seemed to have understood exactly what was happening. Then, the girl got tired of running and threw a stone at the mercenary's head. But the white-haired young man just calmly drew his sword to defend himself. With a quick motion, he cut the stone in half with no trouble at all. The noblewoman was then in shock and totally frightened by the tutor's skill. He praised her attitude for trying to fight back and said it wasn't an easy decision to make. Exhausted, the girl fell to the ground gasping for air, with no strength left to keep fighting. With a cold look, the young man said it seemed she had no more energy to run. He then pointed his sword at the noblewoman and asked if she had any last words. But with a smile, the girl didn't seem to care much about his threat. She challenged him and said she wouldn't lower herself like commoners would in that situation. The mercenary then asked why she was so obsessed with her noble lineage. The blonde young woman just lowered her head in silence for a moment. She revealed that if they took away her noble status, there would be nothing left for her. Angrily, the girl began to shout desperately about magic and her failure. With tears in her eyes, she screamed that he didn't know how much she had tried and failed. The white-haired tutor just watched the young noblewoman's outburst in silence. She went on to say that she failed at magic, at painting, and at everything she tried to do. Desperate, she asked what else was left for her besides her noble lineage. The girl then fell to her knees and wondered what she was without her social status. The white-haired tutor just watched her in silence, processing her entire outburst. Then he summoned a blue energy sword and prepared for the next step of his plan. With tears in her eyes, the young noblewoman seemed to have accepted her tragic end. The mercenary then raised his blade and said he had heard everything she had to say. Terrified and with a red face, the girl said her goodbyes, waiting for the end. With a quick movement, the white-haired boy swung his energy sword. The noblewoman then closed her eyes tightly while waiting for the tutor's final blow. She kept her eyes closed, not knowing what was about to happen to her. Suddenly, the mercenary's blade created massive ice crystals all around her. The young girl opened her eyes and saw the ice crystals forming everywhere. Then, the boy created an ice barrier around that noble woman without hurting her. The girl looked at her hands and wondered if that was some kind of magic. With his plan complete, the white-haired young man then put away his energy sword. He apologized for his rudeness and praised the girl's hard work. The young noblewoman remained in shock, not understanding what had just happened there. The tutor explained that it was just a manifestation of mana and that she did well. Because of this, the girl couldn't hold back her emotions and began to cry uncontrollably. She screamed and cried desperately, releasing all the frustrations she had been holding inside. The mercenary just watched from a distance, while the young woman let it all out. The full moon in the sky then illuminated the end of that intense nightly lesson. The tutor reveals that she belongs to a wild magic school, and the girl is confused by the information. While bandaging her leg, he explains that the learning process varies greatly between different orders of mages. He goes on to say that trying to learn the wrong theories is like forcing your body into clothes that don't fit at all. At that moment, the young noblewoman asks how he discovered she was part of such a rare magical lineage. The white-haired young man says he saw the paintings she made and noticed something very special in those strokes. With a serious look, the mercenary states that she felt the energy of nature and ended up transferring all of it to the canvas. He then explains that mages of this type feel natural mana since they were children, which is why she was always different from others. The blonde girl is in total shock as she realizes her hidden talent has finally been recognized by someone. As soon as he finishes the bandage, the young man says the job is done and now she can walk with less pain. But the master warns that she has only taken the first step and that the real training will begin tomorrow. Suddenly, the blue-eyed girl calls his name while watching him walk away down the dark path. Even though she is embarrassed, the young noblewoman thanks him for his help and shows that her view of the young man has changed. The protagonist just listens to her words in silence, without showing any exaggerated reaction at that moment. With that, the two begin to walk back to the mansion, while the starry night covers the entire forest. During the walk, he comments on the sunset painting and says it was a complete work of art. The next morning, sunlight enters through the bedroom window and lights up the entire luxurious room of the residence. Young, Diela wakes up determined and sits on the bed, ready to test what she learned from her new master. Then the girl extends her hand and begins to focus a small amount of blue energy between her fingers. With an intense glow in her eyes, she tries to manifest her power naturally, just as she was instructed before. However, the magic ends up failing and turns only into smoke, leaving the little noblewoman quite irritated with the result. A maid carries a bucket of water while walking peacefully through the luxurious hallway of the mansion. At that moment, the young blonde girl suddenly opens the door and scares the distracted servant, who almost falls. Startled, the bucket slips from her hands and the water splashes everywhere on the hallway carpet. The dirty water hits the young noblewoman's dress directly, leaving her frozen in that unexpected situation. Desperate, the employee begins to apologize frantically for making such a serious mistake in front of her. But the girl just stares at the woman with a cold look, without expressing any kind of emotion or immediate anger. Then the servant kneels and begs for forgiveness, fearing she will be mistreated by the mistress, as she was in the past. Surprisingly, the girl just tells her to be more careful and continues on her way as if nothing had happened there. Because of this, the maid is in total shock and wonders why she didn't get a slap or a shout from the spoiled girl. As her other colleagues approach curiously, they try to understand what changed in the young mistress's strange behavior. In another room, the white-haired tutor sleeps peacefully, enjoying his rare moment of rest and great peace. Suddenly, violent knocking on the door wakes the young man, who complains about the infernal noise so early on his day off. He then opens the door while rubbing his eye and trying to understand the reason for all the shouting in his ear. At that instant, the blonde girl appears accompanied by the butler and demands that the magic lessons begin at this exact moment today. The gentleman with the monocle is shocked to discover that the young girl finally managed to manifest her mana alone in her room. With a determined look, the student orders the mercenary to teach her quickly because she is very anxious to progress soon. But the young man simply closes the door in their faces and tells them to come back only in the afternoon because he wants to sleep. At this, the butler begins to cry with joy seeing that his mistress has finally decided to take her studies seriously. Irritated by the dismissal, the girl begins to pound on the wood and screams for that person to open the door right now. Even with all the scandal outside, the white-haired young man goes back to bed and decides to ignore the little brat. The day dawns radiantly over the enormous mansion of the noble family, while the sun shines in the blue sky. Then we hear the sound of firm footsteps echoing through the luxurious corridors of that immense property. Two maids comment in surprise that Lady Diela hasn't broken a single plate all day. Because of this, rumors spread, and everyone finds out that the girl finally managed to use her mana. At that moment, someone approaches the servants as the sound of boots gets louder and louder. The dark-haired young man stops and asks what the two of them were saying about his sister just now. Meanwhile, the patriarch of the family continues, writing calmly on a parchment with his quill. In the office, the Lord receives his children to discuss the news about the little girl's magical progress. The Grand Duke states that it is his excellent news and seems satisfied with his daughter's progress. But the young man with green eyes says it is still far too early to celebrate such a simple achievement. Irritated, the blonde brother yells at Raig for not being able to give a single compliment to his own sister. At that instant, the father observes his son's argument with a serious and very attentive look from behind his glasses. He remembers that the girl caused many problems in the past, and they shouldn't cancel her trip to the monastery. The leader of the house continues his task in silence, while weighing the future of that troubled child. Time passes and the sun remains strong, illuminating every corner of that vast medieval kingdom. Inside the room, the noblewoman appears, sitting with her back turned, and seems to be pouting very much about something. Then the white-haired mercenary enters the place and asks if the girl is pouting for some reason. At this, the blonde girl replies that she isn't just pouting, but is actually very angry about everything that is happening. The young man scratches his head and states that acting like a spoiled child won't help anything in that situation. But the little girl screams again, saying it's not a tantrum, and reaffirms that her feeling is one of pure hatred. With that, the white-haired young man says that throwing a tantrum is useless, and everything needs to happen in the correct order to work. But the blonde girl screams in anger and states that she isn't having a fit, but is showing that she is very irritated with him at this moment. The mercenary then stares at her with a serious and cold look while maintaining his calm posture in the face of the girl's revolt. He then says he's going to call it a tantrum anyway, and leaves the little noblewoman totally speechless with his mockery. At that moment, the red-eyed young man places his hand on the chair as he prepares to give an important lesson. With that, he explains from his own experience that using too much mana at once can cause total exhaustion in a mage's body. He goes on to say that resting is just as important as training, but the girl seems to find that talk very boring and tedious. Noticing her discouragement, the teacher asks if she prefers a much less boring method to learn things now. Then he remembers when he used flames and his sword to scare the young girl and show who really calls the shots there. Remembering that moment of pure terror, the noblewoman begins to break into a cold sweat and feels a chill run through her entire body. She quickly changes her attitude and says she doesn't need anything radical and prefers to continue with the normal method instead. With that, the master begins to explain that after mastering the flow of energy, learning 1 star spells will be very easy for her. He reveals that the wild school has no strict rules and focuses on freedom, being perfect for those who learn on their own. The young man states that this style fits her personality very well, and this leaves the blonde girl quite curious at the sudden compliment. At this, the tutor explains that her free spirit has a great synergy with this type of magic, and her noble blood helps a lot. The girl remains silent for a brief moment, while processing those kind words she had never heard from anyone before. With red cheeks, she wonders if she really possesses some special talent for the mystical arts at that moment. The young man confirms that creating an ice wall on the first try proves her potential, and she asks if she is a true genius. But he soon warns that there is a huge difference between having talent and being a real genius, and the conversation continues through the window. Meanwhile, outside, the dark-haired brother watches everything while hidden and listens to the dialogue between the two in the room. At that moment, the dark-haired young man grumbles irritably as he realizes his sister is actually progressing and shows great dissatisfaction. The next day, the sun shines intensely over the enormous mansion, while the heavy training routine continues non-stop across the entire property. With that, the girl runs to the room and tells her master that she can manifest the power but cannot control the direction of the spell. Soon after, she interrupts him during his meal and complains that she tried to use the ice element but the sensation was very strange and different from what was expected. On another day, the little noblewoman continues chasing the tutor through the corridors and screams that she feels the energy flowing, but in a totally wrong way. During sunset, the blonde girl finally finds the mercenary resting near a tree and asks what he is doing there alone. Irritated, the girl complains that he should be near the annex and asks if the young man thinks her father gave him the book just so he could be lazy. Very calmly, the white-haired young man replies that the Grand Duke lent him the material precisely so that he could study in peace. But the girl ignores the answer and states that she finally managed to make the mana flow work and asks him to check the result quickly. Meanwhile, the blonde brother named Valerian observes the view from his office window and seems to be thoughtful about the family's direction. At that moment, the doors open and the white-haired tutor enters the room, answering the urgent call of the future patriarch of the noble house. The nobleman greets the guest and asks him to sit down because the two of them need to have a very serious conversation about recent events. Sitting face to face, the blonde man asks how his sister's performance is and shows great concern for the little girl's behavior. Honestly, the protagonist states that she has progressed quite a bit, but it will still take some time until she can master basic spells. At this, the older brother reveals that their mother will soon return from a trip and warns that the atmosphere in the mansion will change drastically. He warns that the matriarch is a difficult person and that many nobles do not accept seeing a commoner occupying such an important position in the residence. With an attentive look, the mercenary says he will remember this important warning and asks if there is anything else the blonde man wants to say. The future patriarch remains silent for a brief moment while he seems to choose the right words to conclude his reasoning with the young man. He then stands up and explains that his mission as successor is to protect all family members and always be sincere with each of them. But the blonde man sighs and comments that understanding the human heart is a very complex task, and that reality is never as simple as it seems. The white-haired young man asks what the nobleman's point is with all that strange talk. At that moment, the blonde brother raises his fist and seems very emotional remembering the family's past. He reveals with great sadness that little Diala no longer wants to play with him like she used to. The mercenary watches the man's drama with an expression of someone who doesn't understand anything that is happening. The blonde man continues his story, saying that his sister was like a perfect angel when the two were still children. While the nobleman makes his scene, the protagonist just drinks his tea calmly, not caring about his crying. Then the hare asks if there is a way for him to win back the little girl's affection somehow, but the tutor questions why he is being consulted about such a personal and weird matter. Suddenly, the girl's voice echoes through the mansion as she screams, desperately looking for her magic master. The man ignores the previous question and shows that he learned to make handmade dolls with one of the house servants. He displays a very creepy-looking toy and asks what the young man thinks of that strange work of art. Upon seeing the bizarre object, the protagonist asks if the nobleman is trying to cast a curse on someone now. Upset with the response, the blonde man begins to cry and becomes very sensitive to the mercenary's harsh criticism. With that, the scene changes to the outside of the luxurious residence, under a very clear blue sky that day. An elegant woman appears in the main hall and states that she has heard very good things about the white-haired young man. With a smirk, she comments that they managed to hire a very capable magic master for the noble family. The lady introduces herself as Mariella and says she intends to send a beautiful gift to the young man's homeland. At that moment, the young man reveals that he does not belong to any noble house or specific territory of any lord. The woman is in total shock and is startled to hear that the little girl's teacher is actually just a commoner. The sun shines brightly over the luxurious residence of the noble family, indicating it will be a long day full of surprises for everyone there. In the main hall, the young mercenary is surrounded by several maids and a very elegant lady who watches him closely. With a smirk, the woman comments that she has heard great things about the skills of the household's new magic tutor. She introduces herself as Mariella and says she plans to send a beautiful gift to the white-haired young man's homeland. But calmly, the red-eyed youth replies that he doesn't belong to any noble house or a specific lord's territory. The lady is in total shock and wonders if she heard correctly what the guest just said to her face. The protagonist maintains a serious expression and states clearly that he is just an ordinary commoner. At that moment, the woman's face twists into an expression of pure horror upon discovering the teacher's true origins. Going back 1 week in time, we see a luxurious carriage parked right in front of the noble family's massive mansion. With that, young Aselin talks to the mercenary and says she made the right choice in bringing him to her territory. But she explains that she needs to return to Eberstein to handle urgent matters and will leave Delilah under the young man's care. The white-haired youth simply agrees to the order, showing he is ready to fulfill his mission without complaint. Then, the guild leader appears laughing and puts his hand on his subordinate's shoulder while making a joke about his response. He gets into the carriage with the noblewoman and tells the boy to finish the job quickly before someone shows up to cause trouble. The carriage then begins to pull away from the property, leaving the protagonist alone to deal with such a complicated family. But suddenly, the dark-haired girl puts her hand to her face as she realizes she forgot to tell him something very important. With a worried expression, she warns that her mother will return next week and that she forgot to give him a warning about her. The bearded man asks if the family's matriarch is someone who truly needs such a serious and urgent formal warning. At that moment, the scene focuses on the luxurious details of the mansion's ceiling as tension gradually begins to rise in the room. With that, the noblewoman describes her own mother as a true embodiment of terror that no one would want to cross paths with. Mirella gets furious and shouts, asking if a commoner is really her youngest daughter's instructor. The patriarch remains calm and asks his wife to lower her voice while he continues holding his quill. But the lady continues screaming in desperation, saying the little blonde girl is the most precious daughter of that entire noble lineage. At that moment, the Grand Duke takes off his glasses and confesses that he also doesn't like placing ordinary people in such important positions. The lady then recalls that all the other noble teachers gave up, but questions how they chose someone from the mercenary underworld. The Lord then explains that finding good tutors is difficult and reinforces that the white-haired young man was a direct recommendation from their daughter, Aselin. With that, the woman begins pacing the office and says there must be at least a minimum standard of quality for that service. Then she suggests bringing in her own brother, named Flam, to teach the little girl now that she has finally managed to manifest her magic energy. The ruler asks if she wants to take a commander from the border to be a private tutor, and if she thinks managing the duchy is a joke. But the matriarch shouts again, stating that Eberstein's high society is a true and very dangerous battlefield for young people. With that, she points her finger and says she doesn't want to see her daughter become a laughingstock at the grand debutante ball because of a nameless master. At that moment, the large office doors open, and someone enters to interrupt the heated argument between the noble couple. The blonde son, named Valerian, asks his mother to calm down, says she didn't come there just to fight with her husband. But the matriarch tells the boy to step aside and states that the matter is not something that can be easily ignored by anyone there. Then, the other brother, named Reg, questions if the real issue isn't whether that commoner has the talent to be Diala's instructor. He walks slowly while the two watch him closely, waiting for his next words regarding the white-haired mercenary. The dark-haired young man says that having a commoner as a tutor is strange, but if he has the necessary skills, it wouldn't be a big problem. With that, the young man asks his father to let him test the mercenary personally and suggests they face each other in a magic duel. But the patriarch tells his son not to bother and states with full certainty that the white-haired young man is indeed very powerful and capable. At that moment, the green-eyed brother falls silent and stares at his father with a serious expression upon hearing that unexpected praise for the commoner. At that moment, the dark-haired young man suggests they test his sister's skills instead of just focusing on the mercenary. With that, the blonde brother becomes confused and looks at his relative, not understanding the real goal of this unexpected new challenge. Then the young man explains that if the master is truly good at what he does, the little blonde girl should have made incredible progress in a short time. While the head of the house remains silent, he seems to seriously consider the proposal to see his youngest daughter's performance on the battlefield. Then, the green-eyed youth begins to leave the area while his older brother tries to call him back to continue the conversation in the office. But Valerian questions him about what he intends to do by proposing a magic duel against a child who is still so inexperienced. The young man in black asks if the blonde one really believes the little girl has changed her ways and forgotten all about her troubled past. At that moment, the heir states that she is still their only sister and that the family's blood bond should be protected. With an ironic smile, the younger brother scoffs at the term flesh and blood, showing that he no longer feels any affection for the girl. He shouts that the girl's behavior will destroy the noble lineage's name as soon as she is introduced to all of high society. Faced with these harsh words, the blonde brother becomes worried and wonders if his brother's hatred for the little girl has any real and dark foundation. At that moment, the young man states that she was the one who crossed the line first, and that she should remain hidden from the whole world in that annex. The future patriarch simply watches his relative leave while feeling the atmosphere inside the mansion grow increasingly tense. As soon as he leaves, the commotion in the office dies down, but the uncertainty about what will happen in the duel remains in the air for everyone. Meanwhile, a small bird rests on a tree branch outside, indicating that a new morning has begun at the luxurious residence. Suddenly, the little blonde girl bursts into her master's room screaming, showing she is very furious about something she just discovered. The white-haired young man continues reading his book calmly and wonders what the reason is for so much noise so early in his room. Then she throws an official scroll over the pages the young man was reading to get his magic tutor's full attention. With a determined look, the little girl states that if she loses this magic duel, the mercenary will be immediately fired from his position at the mansion. Despite the threat, the young man says he already heard that the opponent is an experienced one-star mage, and that the fight will be difficult for her. The girl gets furious and shouts that the young man will be fired if he doesn't take that challenge seriously. At that, the mercenary calmly replies that he only does the work he was paid for and nothing more. He adds by saying that he has already received a great initial payment, so he doesn't care much about the rest. With that, the blonde girl is in total shock and asks if her instructor is being serious about this. 1 week passes, and the Grand Duchy's flag waves strongly, indicating that the day of the duel has finally arrived. The training courtyard is ready as the noble family and servants gather to watch the match. At that moment, the patriarch walks with authority, accompanied by his wife, who still seems quite irritated with everything. The white-haired young man bows respectfully and announces that the Lord and his entourage have just arrived. He maintains his calm and professional posture, even in the intimidating presence of all those powerful nobles. The father observes the young man and wonders if he is so confident for some secret reason. Sitting on his throne, the Lord thinks that someone with such courage should not be dismissed quickly. Firm footsteps echo through the area as the opponent approaches the battlefield with a deadly gaze. The dark-haired brother walks with his cape swaying, showing that he is ready for the confrontation. With a cold look, he states that this is no simple duel and that he intends to crush his sister. Then, the young man climbs the steps and promises he will make the little girl bitterly regret her entire past. The little noblewoman takes her position on the battlefield as the atmosphere turns heavy between the two siblings. Wearing her red hood, the girl shows a focused expression and seems ready for the fight of her life. But she is startled by what she heard and asks if her master truly doesn't care about anything besides money. Then he explains that her mana has already stabilized, and that soon she will be able to cast powerful spells. At that, the instructor states that she has noble blood running through her veins, leaving the young girl completely speechless. He reinforces the wild school focuses much more on self-study than on receiving constant lessons from someone else. Then the girl shouts in annoyance, wondering why the tutor is saying all those strange things at that exact moment. The young mercenary simply listens to the little girl's venting with a calm and very peaceful expression on his face. Looking down, the blonde girl admits she knows she isn't the best student, but she shows she is being sincere now. Then she cries and says she wants to continue learning from the white-haired young man because she won't accept any other teacher in his place. The master remains silent for a brief moment while observing the determination and deep sadness in his student's eyes. With that, the Ride youth begins putting on his glove and mentions that he has never participated in a formal noble duel before, but he states he can teach her how to win a real fight and asks if the little noblewoman truly wants victory today. At that time, everyone said that young Diala had no talent for magic, and that even famous tutors gave up on her. People commented maliciously that the Duplain lineage had already passed its prime, and that the youngest only knew how to throw tantrums. Some said it would have been better if she had never been born, but the girl shows a fiery look and asks for help to win. At that moment, the little girl walks toward the battlefield with her red cape swaying under that morning's radiant sun. He watches closely and realizes she is not there as a sister or as the youngest daughter of an important family. The girl takes her position with an intense sparkle in her eyes, because now she sees herself only as his disciple and a true mage. The scene changes to a flag with a symbol waving at the top of a pole. At that moment, the young woman in the red cape faces her opponent in the middle of a stone arena. A gentleman with a mustache clears his throat to get everyone's attention. Then he explains that the duel will have advanced rules, and whoever activates their protection first loses. With that, the dark-haired opponent keeps a steady and very serious gaze on the girl, but the little one in the hood isn't intimidated and shows she's ready to start the fight. The magical item that ensures the fighter's safety glows as it floats in the air. Watching from afar, the white-haired young man thinks about the 10-minute time limit and how nobles spend their money. In that instant, the duelist begins to cast a powerful spell that makes the wind blow fiercely. The impact of the energy begins to sway the blonde girl's clothes, but she remains firm in her spot. With his hand outstretched, he concentrates a sphere of green light that grows with each passing second. The young man says he's sorry, but he's going to have to send her back home right now. Unleashing a devastating attack, he launches all of that magic toward his small opponent. The blast of cutting wind moves forward, destroying everything in its path as she just watches. At that moment, the young woman's eyes reflect the glow of the attack coming her way. With agility, she makes a quick move and manages to escape the dangerous blow by ducking under it. The enemy is completely surprised by her speed and wonders how she dared to do that. Even though he's annoyed, he continues his quick movements, trying to hit the girl no matter what. Then, the little one moves like a blur and dodges all of his advances with extreme ease. Maintaining full focus, the little blonde shows that she won't be defeated so easily in this fight. The white-haired young man analyzes the fight and says she's using too much mana to control her spells. Meanwhile, the blast of wind hits an ice barrier, which shatters on impact. The girl in the red hood had raised a huge wall of ice to protect herself from the attack, but her enemy scoffs at her, saying that isn't a real spell, just raw mana. With that, he prepares another, even stronger blow, stating that cheap tricks can be crushed. Then the young man challenges the little blonde to try and stop this new attack that's coming with full force. The little one stays behind her ice barrier as the energy spheres fly in her direction. At this moment, we see a memory of the white-haired boy talking to the girl. He explains that mercenaries don't care about honor and their only goal is victory. The young woman looks worried and thinks that people might dislike her, even if she wins the fight. He asks if she's okay with that, as long as she can reach her final goal. But the blonde girl yells with all her might, showing she's determined to do whatever it takes. Back in the present, the girl faces her opponent with a cold and very determined look. With agility, she runs alongside her ice wall, dodging the enemy's attacks. Then she looks back, and the narration explains that there are mercenaries who always win. The narration continues, saying that these people don't duel, they fight to win. The opponent is surprised to see the little one moving in an unexpected way. Using her magic, the girl slides across the ground, and the narration explains about using the terrain to your advantage. In this way, she uses any means necessary to achieve victory in the battle. Taking advantage of the enemy's distraction, she throws a shard of ice, hitting him squarely. With a furious look, the girl in the red hood concentrates her magic for the next move. But her opponent smiles confidently and declares that this is the end of the line for her. At that moment, the little blonde is surprised to see a new attack being launched in her direction. A blade of wind rushes forward, and she throws herself to the ground to try and escape the blow. The attack hits the ground and kicks up a cloud of dust that covers the entire view of the arena. Watching from afar, the white-haired young man remains calm and continues to watch the duel. A lady in the audience becomes frantic and shouts the girl's name with her hands over her mouth. With that, she asks for the duel to be stopped because the young fighter could get hurt. A man beside her tells her to sit down and says the fight isn't over yet. She argues, saying the girl was hit, but he states that the protection wasn't activated. The man continues with his serious and focused gaze on the arena, knowing something the others didn't see. Back to the white-haired young man. He remains seated on the bench, watching everything calmly. He thinks that she didn't even blink and wonders if this was all part of the plan from the beginning. Meanwhile, the duelist walks through the arena, searching for his opponent in the middle of the dust. He's sure the blow landed and doesn't understand why the protection wasn't activated. Confused, the young man looks from side to side, trying to find the girl who has completely vanished. Suddenly, the wooden floor beneath his feet begins to crack in a strange way. A huge ice spike erupts from the floor and hits him squarely, launching him into the air. From the impact of the surprise blow, the duelist falls to the ground without understanding what happened. He's shocked and realizes she's attacking from under the arena's platform. The opponent looks at the judge and wonders if being off the platform doesn't mean defeat. But the gentleman with the monocle just shakes his head no in response. The young man realizes that being underneath doesn't count as leaving and that no one would expect such a trick. Even so, he gets up from the ground, determined to continue the fight at any cost. More ice spikes shoot out of the floor, and he has to dodge to avoid being hit again. Several ice spears sprout from the platform, forcing the duelist to keep moving constantly. He starts to sweat and realizes it's hard to hit her if he can't even see her. Jumping into the air, he complains that there's no noble etiquette in this duel. Looking at the hole in the floor, the young man calls the girl's name with a worried look. At that moment, the little one in the red hood emerges from the hole, looking up at her opponent from below. The little blonde's eyes glow with an intense red light, showing her full fury. The young man recognizes that look and remembers when his brother Derek did the same. With a new understanding, he seems more serious and focused for the rest of the fight. He concludes that this strategy wasn't hers, but her brother's, who is watching from afar. The duelist adjusts his cape, preparing for the next phase of the battle. With agility, he dodges another ice attack that appears suddenly. Then he says he'll play along and follow the strategy they planned. The blue sky opens up over the destroyed arena at the end of the chapter. The lady in the audience is shocked and asks if the girl went into that dusty pit. She yells at her husband to stop the duel, but he says the young woman hasn't broken any rules. The bearded man in the audience watches the fight with a thoughtful and very serious look. Meanwhile, the girl in the red hood hides under the destroyed platform. With her eyes fixed, she says that now she can see everything more clearly. The little fighter can finally see the flow of her opponent's mana. However, the young man begins to cast a spell and is surprised by the interruption. An ice spike hits the floor near him and throws him off balance for a brief moment. He's furious because she breaks the floor every time he tries to cast a spell, and he can't lose. With a drop of sweat running down, he concentrates to think of a new plan of attack. From above, we see the fighter alone in the destroyed arena near the fallen flag on the ground. The girl notices that the flow of mana has stopped and suspects he's up to something. She gets ready and thinks she'll attack him as soon as he starts to cast the next spell. Seeing the scene, the judge gets startled and tries to get the young master's attention in the middle of the arena. The young man surprises everyone by jumping and balancing on top of the flagpole. He knows that from this distance, she can't react in time, but casting a spell from there is impossible. So the young man decides there's only one way to win and concentrates his blue energy. He's going to destroy the entire platform without needing an incantation for it. The white-haired brother watches the scene with a serious and very focused look. With a blue energy explosion, the wooden platform begins to fall apart. The force of the attack is so great that the flagpole breaks at its base. With that, the young man starts to fall along with the pole that couldn't handle the power. The entire arena goes up in a gigantic explosion that kicks up a lot of dust. Frantic, the lady in the audience shouts the young man's name, her face full of worry. Amidst the smoke, the young fighter manages to land safely on the ground. With a sharp gaze, he focuses on a specific point in the middle of all the confusion. The silhouette of the little one in the red hood runs at high speed through the dust. Then, Reg prepares a blue magic arrow and aims it in the direction of his opponent. With a quick move, he fires the energy projectile, which cuts through the air like a bolt of lightning. The girl's eye reflects the glow of the arrow approaching her dangerously, but the little blonde holds out her hand and manages to stop the magic attack at the last second. The palm of her hand glows intensely as she holds the energy with ease. With her hair flying, she maintains her serious expression, completely focused on the battle. The arrow transforms into a shovel of bright blue energy under the girl's control. Then, she redirects the attack and sends the shovel back to its original owner. The little one runs right behind her counter, attack to put even more pressure on the enemy. The young man thinks that if he lands one magic arrow, he'll get the advantage in the fight. But the young woman jumps into the air and lands a powerful kick right in the opponent's chest. The two stare at each other up close as the blow lands squarely with great force. Rag falls to his knees, feeling the pain of the direct impact he just took. In that instant, the girl's hand grabs a handful of dirt from the arena floor. With a quick move, she throws all the dirt in her opponent's face. With that, the dirt hits the young man's eyes, and he cries out from the unfair attack. Then he kneels to clean his face, while the little one takes the chance to move away. The young man thinks she's out of mana, which is why she's using kicks and throwing sand. Then he understands that the girl is going this far to prove her worth in the duel. So he decides he'll face her with everything he's got, like a true brother would. A bright light shines in the blue sky, marking a change in the battle's atmosphere. The blonde-haired young woman faces her opponent, who is still recovering on the ground. With a hand on her head, she looks exhausted. but her eyes show she won't give up. At this moment, a little bit of blood trickles from the corner of the little fighter's mouth. We see a drop fall, and the scene changes to a memory about using magic. A voice explains that mana is like paint, and a spell is the brush used to paint with it. The white-haired young man teaches that with the brush, you gather the paint and create an image. Then the red-eyed young man concludes his lesson by saying that this is what they call magic. The little one's eyes sparkle, amazed by her master's explanation. Under the starry sky, the boy shows her the power of mana flowing in the air. Back in the present, the little blonde closes her eyes and seems to find new strength. She remembers that mana is paint, and a spell is the brush as a blue aura surrounds her. With that, the young woman begins to feel the mana stirring at her fingertips. The blue energy glows brightly in her hand as she prepares for the attack. With a determined look, the girl says she's going to paint a picture with this magical paint. The narration says that this is magic, as the girl is enveloped in a blue aura and creates an ice spear. At this, the judge with the monocle is completely shocked by what he's seeing happen in the arena. The lady in the audience is also startled and says the young woman is using a one-star magic. The opponent recognizes the ice spear and worries that she might cause an accident with so much power. But the little one in the red hood doesn't hesitate and remains focused on her attack with a steady gaze. Then her opponent also surrounds himself in a blue aura and prepares for the final showdown. He moves forward, saying that even with one-star magic, he's still one step ahead of her. With that, the young man decides he'll hit her first to guarantee his victory in the duel. The little blonde points her hand down and concentrates all her energy into the decisive blow. At that moment, Reg fires several energy arrows that fly toward the girl. The two spells collide in the center of the arena and create a blinding explosion of light. The impact generates a huge shockwave that destroys what was left of the battlefield. In the stands, the young man's mother shouts the little one's name, her face full of dread. In the middle of the smoke, a golden sphere of energy glows brightly, protecting someone. General Pelham's protection sphere has been activated and now floats slowly in the air. Out of breath, the young fighter looks at the result of the clash, his whole body tired. On the other side, the girl is also breathing heavily and seems to be at her limit. Watching from afar, the white-haired young man maintains his cold and calculating gaze. We go back 1 year in time, where a few small birds are resting in a nest. The tree stands right near the grand mansion as life goes on peacefully. The Duke walks through the halls when he's told that an important letter arrived that morning. He then finds out the message is about a social gathering that's happening soon. The head of the house then spots little Diala sitting alone in her room, deep in thought. The little girl looks sad as she stares into space with a very deep and serious gaze. Her father remains silent, a heavy worry weighing on his heart. Back in the present, the young blonde girl's face is dirty after the intense fight, but a golden sphere of protection glows around her, making sure nothing worse happens. The referee then confirms the barrier was activated, and the duel has finally come to an end. Her brother is on the ground, completely drained and frustrated for being taken down like that. Meanwhile, the white-haired master watches the whole scene, keeping his usual calm demeanor. He realizes the boy has accepted his loss, knowing the instructor's plan worked perfectly. Just then, the little girl starts to cry out loud, releasing all the fear she had been holding inside. Patriarch watches his children from a distance, trying to grasp the real impact of such a strange victory. But her mother is furious and yells that such magic is too unrefined for a noble. The girl is still in tears, unable to believe her technique is being criticized so harshly. The lord of the house looks thoughtful as he listens to his very angry wife's harsh complaints. Then, a memory surfaces of a knight named Raymond, who served with great honor in the past. He's talking with a veteran who praises his courage, saying he has his father's eyes. The man speaks of ambition and gives thanks for the opportunity, all while keeping a steady gaze. At that, little Diala can't hold back her tears and begins to cry from exhaustion. The head of the house watches it all with a very serious expression, as if judging what just happened. He remarks that the light in his daughter's eyes has changed quite a bit. As the maids approach with concern, the maids become frantic when they see her injuries and say she needs medical attention right away. But the girl quickly pulls away with a sharp movement, showing she doesn't want anyone to touch her. The little blonde girl walks through the damaged area while her opponent stays behind, speechless. The dark-haired boy seems speechless and just watches his sister struggle to walk away. He then scratches his head and congratulates the young girl on a job well done, even though he's clearly shaken. One of the staff members then approaches to carefully guide the little girl to her room, but the young noble ignores her and keeps walking, her face grim and full of determination. The little girl then approaches her master, who was sitting on a bench watching from a distance. The white-haired tutor just looks at her with his red eyes, waiting for her to say something. The blonde girl lowers her head, seeming to feel the weight of not having won. Then she starts to cry again, showing that her spirit is quite shaken after the intense fight. But the girl clutches her clothes tightly and whispers that she lost the duel to her brother. She then apologizes as tears stream endlessly down her dirt-streaked face. The master watches his student's distress, keeping a calm expression so as not to make things worse for her. He then places his hands on her shoulders and tells her in a very gentle way that it's okay. He finishes by saying it's okay to lose, comforting the little girl under the blue sky. Then the young man says she should use this feeling to climb even higher and become very powerful. The little girl looks at her instructor in pure shock as tears continue to stream down her face. But the little girl starts crying loudly again, letting out all the anguish she had bottled up in her heart. The maids watch the scene from a distance, worried about the young lady's emotional state. Then we see the feet of an elegant woman, quickly approaching the commotion. The matriarch then runs over frantically, crying out her daughter's name when she sees the terrible state she's in. The lady kneels to comfort the little blonde girl, saying she can't believe what she's been through. Her mother says everything is okay now and tells the child to get medical help right away. The mercenary's student accepts the hug, trying to calm down in her mother's arms. The maids then begin to lead the girl away from the courtyard so she can rest. The woman then wipes her face with a handkerchief, seeming to hold a deep resentment for what she's witnessed. But the protagonist just turns his back and begins to walk away with his usual cold demeanor. Then the noblewoman's firm footsteps echo, showing she isn't going to let this go. The red-eyed young man notices something is off and wonders what's about to happen. The matriarch then yells furiously, calling the young man common trash and questioning his actions. She then strikes the instructor hard across the face, making it clear she won't be challenged. The woman then grabs his clothes in a rage, saying he has tainted her family's purity, but the young man takes the blow in silence, keeping a serious expression even while being berated. She then yells about dignity, saying there are values a commoner like him could never understand. The lady then calls for her husband, complaining that the training her daughter received was awful. Then, the woman is struck by her husband and stands in shock, a red mark on her face. The Duke grabs her by the arm and asks if she doesn't realize who is being unseemly. The lady is stunned, not understanding why he's defending a mere commoner like that. He agrees the young man is of no standing, but reminds her that he is still their daughter's teacher. The protagonist remains silent, thinking that no father should ever treat a teacher that way. The Lord then asks the young man to forgive his wife, saying everyone has their own way of showing they care. The white-haired young man stays silent, just processing the whole commotion. But the tutor says it's fine, and the Lord calls him for a serious private conversation. The two begin to walk, while the matriarch stays behind, watching everything with resentment. Her face red with anger, the woman makes it clear she won't forget this slight anytime soon. In his office, the patriarch dips his quill in the inkwell and says the young man has taught Diala very well. As master of the estate, he states he must give the tutor a fitting reward. The Lord then offers a 3-star magic spell, leaving the young mercenary quite surprised. He realizes the nobleman hit the nail right on the head regarding his desires. The young man thinks that a 5-star mage knows him better than he knows himself and has made a perfect offer. Knowing an opportunity like this must be seized, he confirms he truly wants the reward. But the Duke explains that while he has taught her well, a 1-star magic isn't enough. The white-haired young man listens intently as the noble says the girl can now grow on her own. With a serious look, the patriarch reveals that his daughter no longer needs an instructor, but a true master. The lord of the house then dips his quill in the ink, once more to finalize their agreement. The Duke remarks that the young man has too much ambition for a commoner, and that he shouldn't even dream of it. He goes on to say he knows how insulting this is to nobles, but he'll overlook it, just because it's him. The protagonist remains silent as the lord of the house reveals he knows his true intentions. The patriarch then states that with such a mindset, he can't stay there for long, and begins to write. With a serious look, the nobleman asks directly if the young man is prepared to leave the mansion. The mercenary confirms that he is, but the Duke asks him to teach little Diala for a while longer. The white-haired young man then thinks about the highest level a commoner can possibly reach in their world. The Lord then repeats the question, asking if he truly wants a 3-star magic spell as his reward. Without hesitation, the red-eyed young man answers yes, as he greatly desires that powerful ability. Just then, a door opens, and a brilliant light illuminates the entire hallway of the secret location. The protagonist then enters a massive library and begins to explore the shelves filled with books. He carefully takes an old, detailed book that was stored on one of the nearby shelves. Opening the tome, he sees various runes and magical symbols drawn on the time-yellowed pages. The young mercenary analyzes the contents carefully, looking very focused on learning the new spells. With an admiring gaze, he realizes the material is truly impressive and very valuable. The narrator explains that many mages spend their entire lives trying to obtain a single 2-star book. But here, the white-haired young man has access to an entire collection of books with 3-star magic. He then thinks that he now has more than enough reason to stay at the estate a while longer. Elsewhere, the guildmaster worries, knowing that if a certain blonde girl finds out, it will cause a huge problem. The scene then ends with 2 white doves flying freely across the blue sky on that sunny day. With a proud smile, the little noble girl brags that she is now a 1-star mage. The white-haired tutor agrees half-heartedly while reading a book, saying she can be called that. The girl is furious at his lack of enthusiasm, but the young man retorts that the achievement wasn't hers. She then complains that it's not easy, and he notes that she seems to have recovered well over the last 3 days. The master then teases her, reminding her that she was crying her eyes out before, leaving her completely embarrassed. With that, the little blonde girl denies everything, yelling that she wasn't crying, it was just a speck of dust in her eye. The young noble pouts and complains that she thought she'd be kicked out, and that her father took a long time to announce his decision. The instructor then suggests starting the lesson, saying that since she's growing fast, she'll learn other spells soon. The girl looks at him with a mischievous smile and asks what he meant by the word fast. He explains that her growth is unusual, and she boasts that she's the type to keep her promises. The apprentice then suggests starting with magic arrows or her brother's powerful wind blades. She also mentions her incredible ice spear, but the tutor cuts her off, saying she'll be training manifestation. Confused, the little girl asks why, since she thought they were going to learn 1-star spells. The white-haired young man explains that there are many reasons, but in the end, the basics are always the most important. The little noble then agrees to the mana training, even without understanding exactly what he means. With a bummed-out face, she laments getting all excited for nothing, thinking she would learn something new and cool. The young blonde-haired girl continues, with her clear expression of disappointment, as she looks at her teacher. The master then asks why she's looking at him like that, and the girl wants to know if there's something on his face. He says no and explains he's just surprised she's obeying so easily for the first time. At that, the noble girl gets all flustered and states with her arms crossed that she has always respected his words. The master then remembers the time the girl threw dirty water on him with a malicious smile on her face. He continues, saying she spilled that water twice, making the young girl completely embarrassed. The little blonde asks if he still remembers that, and the young man replies that it's pretty hard to forget. With that, she tries to change the subject by praising the weather and runs off excitedly for her magic lesson. But the white-haired young man just smirks, knowing she's avoiding the subject. Later that night, the full moon illuminates the massive mansion of the noble family under the starry sky. In the gardens, the girl trains her mana with great effort and seems to be completely exhausted. Just then, the instructor approaches and comments that he heard her schedule is about to get much fuller. The two of them sit on the ground, tired, and the little noble confirms she's also heard the news. She then explains that starting next week, she'll also have etiquette and general education classes. The master asks if that isn't a good thing, but the young girl questions if he thinks she's happy about it. The blonde then complains about all the boring subjects she'll have to study and wonders how her sister put up with it all. The tutor then reveals that's why her sister is called the Flower of Duplain and is the center of high society. The girl says she just wants to study magic, and the young man tells her to do so, since the Duke gave his permission. The mercenary then asks with a confident look if there is anyone who would kick him out now. But the little noble girl smiles and says yes, because even with her father's support, her mother wouldn't accept it. The young man asks why the matriarch wants him gone so badly, and she explains her mother's concerns. The master then comments that her duel was a far cry from the dignity that nobles so desperately seek. The girl says that if it's nothing special, then it's not a big deal, and looks very confused. With a determined look, he reveals that shutting the matriarch up isn't as hard as she thinks. He just has to take away her excuses. The little noble girl is confused by her master's words and doesn't quite understand his plan. The next day, the routine in the mansion continues as normal under the morning sun. The matriarch walks through the halls with a look of headache and worry, She then remembers the instructor and imagines how he could be a terrible influence on her daughter. With that, the lady laments the situation of her poor little girl, who is in bad hands. The woman imagines the mercenary teaching the mercenary way to the young noble girl. In her vision, she sees her daughter arriving in high society carrying a wild pig on her shoulders. The matriarch then gets a headache just thinking about her daughter laughing like a maniac. The lady then thinks that even with her husband's support, she's still the lady of the estate. With that, the woman decides she will find a way to solve this problem once and for all. Just then, the little noble girl appears and calls for her mother in a very calm voice. The matriarch turns with a smile and thinks about how much she loves her daughter's childish ways. She fondly remembers how the little girl always runs into her arms smiling. With these thoughts, the lady is silent for a moment, just appreciating her daughter, but suddenly, her expression changes to one of complete confusion at the young girl's attitude. Wearing a blue dress, the little noble girl formally asks if her mother rested well the night before. At this, the matriarch is completely shocked and doesn't understand this change in behavior at all. The girl explains that she couldn't leave the annex before, but now has a piano lesson. The woman remains stunned and stammers, not knowing how to react to her daughter's new posture. The little noble girl then says goodbye with a curtsy and says she must go as her schedule is full. Confused, the lady asks her daughter about the etiquette lessons that were only supposed to start next week. With a confident smile, the little noble girl confirms the information and says she's looking forward to the classes. At this, the matriarch becomes even more confused and tells the young girl to hurry to her class. The woman then watches her daughter walk away with a very different posture than before as the servants look on. Just then, one of the maids drops her tray on the floor, startled by the young noble's change. With that, the little girl turns and asks the servant if she was hurt in the fall. The maid is shocked by the kindness and stammers that she's fine. The matriarch then watches her daughter walk away again, unable to believe what she's seeing. Meanwhile, in the noble district of Ebelstein, Rosia Hall is full of laughter and conversation. A dark-haired young woman sips tea while listening to her friend talk about her concern at their last meeting. The dark-haired girl then apologizes for making her friend worry like that. With a smile, she explains that most of her worries have been resolved, and she's doing much better. Her red-haired friend named Ellent is relieved, but comments on the rumors that she saved someone. The young noble then reveals that her younger sister needed a magic teacher, and she went to find one herself. Ellent is shocked by the revelation and wonders how amazing this teacher must be for her to do that. Just then, another noble named Denise joins the conversation and asks about the younger sister. The dark-haired girl confirms that she saw her sister at the mansion, and that she's become a very proper young lady. She goes on to say that the little one even manifested one-star magic, and her conduct was flawless. Denise finds this odd, as she heard the Duplain family was hiding their youngest daughter. With a smile, the young noble says it was worth going to the mercenary guild to find the tutor. Meanwhile, the young woman with glasses keeps writing in her book, unaware of the commotion that's about to unfold. At this, the red-haired noble becomes thoughtful upon hearing that a simple mercenary is acting as a teacher. She then takes a sip of her tea, while trying to understand how the little blonde girl has changed so much. Just then, a memory comes to mind of when the staff would run away in fear because of the girl's strong temper. The guest is then impressed by the fact that the instructor turned that little terror into a one-star mage. But silence falls over the room as the young lady finishes her drink with a very mysterious look. The young woman then asks the older sister what the name of this talented magic master might be. She comments that this man will be very famous in the future, and that she would like to know his identity now. With a smile on her face, the firstborn reveals that the young man's name is Derek and seems very proud. We then see the little blonde girl telling her mother that the master is also teaching her etiquette rules. At this, the matriarch is surprised by the dedication and praises her daughter's effort in wanting to study on her own. But the little girl soon corrects the lady, saying that it was actually the tutor who explained everything. With great joy, the little one claims that she can only act like a lady because of his advice. Just then, the woman tries to keep smiling, but the young man's name won't stop echoing in her mind. The lady then walks furiously down the hall, as she can't stand to hear about this commoner anymore. At this, she grinds her teeth and vows that she will find a way to end this situation once and for all. Meanwhile, one of the servants comments that the young master is being very kind to everyone in the house. The gardener also notices the change and says that the little one's mood has improved greatly in just a few weeks. With that, the butler is impressed and compares the little blonde's posture to the elegance of her older sister. But the matriarch watches from afar with great resentment, realizing that her daughter finally looks like a true noble. That same night, the stars shine brightly as silence falls over the entire property. At that, the spell book is open on the grass, revealing complex symbols that glow under the moonlight. The white-haired young man is sweating a lot as he tries his best to control his energy. A blue aura then begins to envelop his body, showing that the secret training is very demanding. He maintains total focus as he tries to stabilize the flow of mana now running through his veins. At this, his hand glows intensely, and the magical sparks show that the power is almost out of control. The instructor then falls back, completely exhausted, as he tries to catch his breath after so much effort. Just then, he senses a presence approaching and quickly turns his head to see who is there. The Duke's son then appears, apologizing for interrupting the master's study time. The tutor sits up and asks what would bring the nobleman to this place so late at night. As the wind blows softly, the two men stand in silence, observing the starry sky. The two begin to talk about little Diala, and the red-eyed young man agrees to hear what he has to say. The visitor then notices the 3-star book and is shocked to learn that his father lent it to him. The guest is speechless, knowing that the material is a treasure that few are allowed to touch. The white-haired young man explains that it's a difficult level, but that he wants to study the content in advance. He remembers that the patriarch called him a true mage, which is why he was given this great trust. With that, the young man in the uniform is very impressed by the determination the commoner shows. The mercenary then asks the real reason for the visit, and wants to know what the other wishes to say about his sister. At this, the nobleman turns completely red and asks shyly what teenage girls like these days. But the master just stares at him with a completely serious expression, not understanding the strange question. The nobleman suggests making a cloth doll that looks like his sister to give her as a gift right then. We then see the toy with a very creepy appearance and strange seams all over its face. The white-haired master then immediately rejects the idea with a very serious and focused look. With that, the young man in uniform gives a nervous laugh and agrees that it wouldn't be a good gift for the little one. Just then, the two of them stand there, observing the beauty of the starry night in complete and utter silence. But soon they decide to go back inside the mansion, walking calmly across the garden lawn. The dark-haired young man then thanks the instructor for everything he has done for his family lately. He then comments that the atmosphere in the residence is much better, and everyone seems very happy now. With a smile, the young man states that even his father seems pleased with what's happening in the house. The firm footsteps then echo through the garden as the conversation flows in a very friendly manner between them. Just then, the hare observes the sky and says that people really can change over time. The young noble then looks up and reflects on how he himself needs to seek personal growth. With that, he turns to the mercenary and thanks him again with a look of pure gratitude and respect. The red-eyed young man just listens to everything in silence, always maintaining his mysterious and calm posture. The little blonde's brother then comments that her magic seems very different from anything he's ever seen before. At that moment, the master thinks that the young man is a true genius for noticing such small and rare details. With that, the nobleman mentions that her mana style seems to come from the famous wild school of combat. The teacher then explains that when she reaches a certain level, she won't need a guide to evolve anymore. At this, the instructor states that at very high levels, a master's interference can even hinder the student. With these thoughts, they go their separate ways, knowing that the little noble's time to shine will come soon. 2 months pass, and we see a delicate flower on the table, illuminated by the morning sun. The little blonde girl is sitting while the maid carefully arranges her hair. The little girl then smells the flowers and comments that spring seems to last for months. With that, she says that she has already mastered 1-star magic and has become friends with everyone in the mansion. Just then, the young noble's eyes sparkle as she states that all of this is thanks to her tutor. But the servant smiles and asks if she is so happy because she has another magic lesson today. The little one then decides to set aside one of the flowers to give to the white-haired master later. Suddenly, the flower falls from her hand in slow motion, and the mood in the room changes completely. The plant now lies on the floor as a feeling of sadness fills the room. The little girl is then in shock, with tears in her eyes, as she sees her master standing in front of her. Just then, the blonde girl asks what he meant by those harsh, blunt words. He is accompanied by her brother and maintains a very distant look, avoiding eye contact with the girl. With that, the young man states that he has nothing left to teach her and that their training is over. We then see the fallen flower on the floor, as the narrator says that nothing lasts forever, like the seasons. Later, the red-eyed young man speaks with the Duke and explains that his daughter is very talented. But the young man states that if he continues to stay there, he will end up hindering his student's natural growth. The head of the house then understands there is no longer a reason for the mercenary to remain in the mansion. The Lord remains in complete silence for a long time, just processing the difficult decision. Just then, the patriarch stands up from his chair and faces the teacher with great seriousness. With that, he thanks him for all the changes and for the incredible progress his daughter has made in recent months. The Lord confesses that he was so consumed by work that he ended up being an absent father, but now he feels relieved. He then looks at the tutor and asks directly when the young man intends to leave the mansion for good. The white-haired young man reveals that he will catch a ride in the older sister's carriage when she comes to visit. With that, the patriarch tells him to return the library key, and the young man agrees to give it to the butler. But the noble is very direct and says he doesn't need to wait, ordering the key to be returned right now. The instructor is silent for a moment, just holding the spellbook he was reading. The lord of the house then dismisses the young man, saying he can leave if he has nothing more to say. With a somber look, the red-eyed young man just lowers his head without saying a word about it. He then gives a final bow to the head of the family and prepares to leave the office. His footsteps echo down the giant hallway as he walks alone, with a very serious expression on his face. But suddenly, the little noble girl appears and complains that he showed up out of nowhere and is now leaving the same way. The little girl stands there with a very sad look, seemingly in disbelief that her master is leaving. The tutor says there's nothing to be done, and she retorts that she knows he won't listen, but she'll speak her mind anyway. With her eyes full of tears, the young noble begs her teacher not to leave her like this. The white-haired young man averts his gaze and remains silent, unable to face his student. He then turns his back and starts to walk away, leaving the little blonde girl behind in the empty hallway. He explains that he will go back to being a mercenary, and that she should keep training for her debut in society. The little girl lowers her head with an expression of deep sadness, looking as if she has lost all hope. With a smile, the young man says that they will meet again, and he will be able to teach her new things. At this, the little one lifts her face in anger and says he's so annoying for making a promise like that. The little girl complains that he always says the right thing, leaving her with no arguments to respond. Later that night, the little noble has a restless sleep and seems to be having a nightmare. In her dream, several shadows surround her, telling her she is a useless child with no talent. The voices continue to haunt her, yelling that she is the shame of the family and should never have been born. At that, her eyes snap open with an expression of pure terror and deep fear. With that, the young girl wakes up screaming in despair and sits up in bed, her heart racing. She tries to catch her breath as sweat drips down her face after that horrible dream. Just then, the little girl realizes it was all just a nightmare and tries to calm down a bit. But one of the maids rushes into the room and asks if the young master is really okay. The little noble looks at the servant with a tired gaze and tries to hide the scare she just had. A dangerous idea then pops into her head, and she starts thinking of a way to resolve things. She then imagines going back to being the spoiled girl she was before to create a pretext and cause a lot of trouble. With a somber look, the little one thinks about how she could act terribly to everyone in the house. She believes that if she does this, her master would be forced to stay and take care of her again. The young noble bites her lip, caught in a terrible dilemma, not knowing which path to take. But she soon discards this idea and decides she will no longer act in that selfish and childish way. With a smile, the little girl says it's okay, because she knows that kind of attitude doesn't make her valuable. The next day, the morning arrives, bringing a new light of hope to the grand estate of the nobles. We then see the instructor with his bags outside, as the older sister prepares for the trip. With a gentle smile, she tells the young man to say his goodbyes, as they will be leaving the mansion soon. The white-haired young man prepares for departure with a serious and determined look on his face. Outside, the whole family and the servants gather for the young teacher's final farewell. The oldest son asks if he's really leaving, and the instructor confirms that he needs to go back to where he came from. With that, the siblings thank him for his hard work and offer to help with anything he might need in the future. The mercenary just thanks them with his head bowed, seeming to process the whole farewell. Just then, he raises his gaze and looks at the little noble girl with his intense red eyes. The little girl remains with her arms crossed and an expression of pure stubbornness on her face. At this, she gets all flustered and asks why her former master is staring at her like that. With that, the little blonde says she's not a child anymore and wasn't going to beg him to stay there. But the white white-haired young man states that it was an honor to teach her and hopes she remembers his magic. The young girl then smiles and says she'll tell everyone that he is her great teacher. The red-eyed mercenary cracks a small smile upon hearing his apprentice's proud words. However, the girl's expression soon turns sad, and she seems to be fighting back tears in front of everyone. At this, she tells him to take care, and the young man tells the little one not to overdo it in her training. The noble then yells that she's an adult now and knows how to take care of herself without anyone's help. Just then, we see a different glint in the young instructor's eye as he looks at her with admiration. A memory of him saying the same words about being an adult who can manage on his own comes to mind. With that, the older sister approaches and places a hand on his shoulder to give one last piece of advice. She hugs him warmly and asks the young man to take her words seriously and keep them in his heart. The red-eyed young man remains silent as the carriage prepares for the long journey back. The little girl stares at the tutor with her arms crossed and a very serious expression on her face. The young man then holds her face, says that she doesn't need to become an adult so soon. With that, the little noble girl turns bright red, her eyes filled with sad tears. She covers her mouth to stifle a sob as she watches her master walk away for good. Just then, the young girl calls out his name loudly so that the young man won't leave like that. But with a tearful smile, she waves and promises that they will meet again in the future. At this, the instructor turns and arranges to meet her in the city of Ebelstein one day. The little noble girl nods, trying to hold back the tears that insist on falling. The scene then cuts to the blue sky, as a new chapter begins for all of them now. Everything changes to the commercial district of Ebelstein, where a rat runs through the dirty streets. We then see the door of a tavern with a very rustic and intricately detailed design. Inside, a man takes a very hard blow to the face and falls to the ground without reacting. The crowd goes wild, shouting for his opponent to end it. The young man takes hit after hit, his face bruised from the blows. At that moment, a blonde girl shouts the protagonist's name with an excited smile on her face. With a cold look, the young mercenary states that he is finally back in his true home. The story takes us back to Belden's Tears Tavern, the home of the mercenaries. There, the guild master welcomes the young man with a fancy mead that only the nobility drinks. His blonde friend then jokes that his face looks paler after living like a noble. With that, the girl asks what went down, since she thought the aristocrats were crazy. The white-haired young man says he was just working and doesn't have much to tell. The mercenary complains that he talks like a noble now and asks him to share what happened. The chief tries to calm her down, but the young woman yells that she worked even harder while he was away. At that, the older man asks if they paid well for the young man's service. But the protagonist says he got something more important than money, leaving his chief confused. He then places a book with gold details on the table, surprising everyone. The girl is astonished and asks if that's a 2-star spellbook, but the red-eyed young man reveals that it's actually a 3-star grimoire. The two of them panic, thinking he stole the item and could get caught for it. Calmly, the mercenary explains that Grand Duke Duplain himself gave him the book. The blonde doesn't believe it and grabs him, asking if they're also looking for an archery instructor. Later that night, a candle lights up the tavern. The blonde girl is asleep at the table, while the young man asks about new requests. He says his combat skills are rusty, and he wants a simple mission. His chief says that's not true, but mentions they always need a reliable mage. So, the white-haired young man says he wants to start tomorrow, as soon as possible. With that, the two mercenaries set off in a cart for the new mission. During the job, the blonde girl runs desperately, fleeing from a monster, but soon we see the duo standing over the body of the creature, which has been defeated. Afterward, they face giant spiders, and the young man uses his mana sword to fight. After the battle, the girl is exhausted in the cart while her friend reads a book. As night falls, the two of them camp near a fire to rest. While his partner sleeps, the white-haired young man trains his magic alone. With a blue aura around him, he concentrates to control his power. The mage then manipulates a mana crystal with his hands, releasing a great energy. With that, a great blue light explodes, showing the result of his training. The light from the magical explosion illuminates the entire dark forest around them. With that, the young man collapses to the ground, exhausted, saying he has now mastered 2-star spells. He then opens the grimoire and continues his nightly studies, but the young man thinks that the 3-star level is incredibly difficult to reach. The seasons pass, and autumn arrives at Belden's Tears Tavern. Soon after, winter covers the place in snow, and the mage's training continues. On a cold night, the tavern door bursts open. Then, the young man and his blonde friend enter the place, injured and shivering from the cold. The guild chief comments that they went to Mount Kent in that freezing weather. He holds a sack and says that only they would be crazy enough to bring back a harpy's head. The white-haired boy cleans himself up and thanks them for the towel he received. With that, the master offers them a day off. But as a new mission for the young man, his chief reveals that the job pays well and is easy, but a bit troublesome. Then the man explains that the mission came from the Rohel mercenaries of West Street. The request is from Count Belmierd, and the red-eyed young man heads to the location. They're looking for a commoner for a magic duel. Basically a punching bag. He just needs to let them hit him a few times to receive the payment. Arriving there, he sees a red-haired girl walking with an elderly gentleman. The old man explains to the young woman that they've prepared a commoner for her to practice attack magic on. The red-haired young woman gets irritated and asks why she would fight a commoner. The master says it's part of the training and that they promised the young man a good reward. The girl reluctantly agrees, thinking that nobles are all the same. She then brags that she'll soon reach the 2-star level, which is far superior. Meanwhile, the mercenary prepares on a bench, adjusting his boots. With a serious look, the white-haired young man clears his throat and stands up. The noblewoman turns to him and asks if he is her opponent for today. He then bows and formally introduces himself as Derek to the young lady. She says her name is Ellington and thinks she's heard the young man's name somewhere before. Then the redhead calls them to the arena and questions how a mage can be so young. The girl stretches for the combat while the protagonist watches the scene. The red-haired girl then asks if he understands the basic etiquette of a duel. The white-haired young man calmly replies that he understands the basics. At this, the noblewoman says he must fight with all his strength and that she'll end it quickly. She sighs and plans to push him out with a shockwave to finish it. But the mercenary asks her what kind of resistance she expects. The young woman is confused by the question and thinks the whole thing is ridiculous. He then explains that he needs to know the level of resistance to be able to help her. The elderly gentleman accompanying them just nods his head in agreement. The red-haired girl gives a smirk, finding his way of speaking unique, so she repeats that he must fight with all his strength against her. The red-eyed young man stays silent for a moment, analyzing the situation. He then agrees and says he will do as she commands as mana appears in his hand. The two duelists prepare for combat, releasing their magical auras. The noblewoman prepares a spell, praising the commoner for mastering magic at such a young age. But she thinks she must show him the wall that separates nobles from commoners. At this, the young woman launches a powerful wind attack in her opponent's direction. The protagonist faces the blow head-on, his red eyes glowing. With a simple hand movement, he easily deflects the gust of wind. The magic attack ends up hitting a tree and explodes with great force. The red-haired girl is shocked, as she can't believe he defended her attack. The mercenary then calmly asks if she's going to launch her next attack now. The duelist understands that he really had a reason to be so confident. Even so, she doesn't give up and prepares another, even more powerful spell. Several magical ice arrows appear out of nowhere around the young noblewoman. The energy lances position themselves and aim directly at the white-haired young man. With that, the girl declares that this is the end and launches her final attack. The mercenary prepares to block the attack without showing any concern. The noblewoman is completely astonished by what happens next. All of her ice arrows shatter and are easily deflected by him. The red-haired girl stands motionless as her best attack has failed. The noblewoman wonders how he can control a simple spell with such mastery. The old master praises the commoner's magical level and his mercenary reputation. With that, the redhead admits she underestimated him and will now fight seriously. A powerful fiery aura envelops her as she prepares for the next blow. The red-eyed young man realizes she has changed her strategy to destroy the arena. He praises the noblewoman's adaptability and prepares for what's to come. A rain of fire arrows is summoned from the heavens by the red-haired girl. The protagonist observes the massive attack that covers the entire battlefield. The mercenary knows he won't be able to dodge all the arrows, so he creates a blue energy barrier to protect himself from the attack. The fire arrows fall from the sky and crash against the magic shield. The projectiles explode upon touching the barrier, creating a grand light show. The duelist observes the result of her attack, hoping to have won. Everything is covered by a cloud of dust and smoke after the explosions. In the midst of the smoke, the white-haired young man stands firm with his magic. He then notices something rapidly approaching in his direction. The noblewoman emerges from the dust with an ice spear ready for the final attack. The young man is surprised because he won't have time to dodge or create another barrier. He acknowledges the girl's insane talent for creating such a fast attack. Then a flash of light blinds everyone in the battle arena. The redhead cries out in pain as the bright light has completely blinded her in the middle of her attack. Disoriented, she falls to the ground, not understanding what just happened. The young woman tries to get up and wonders where her opponent has hidden. She decides to focus on sound to try and locate his position, but something passes by her without her being able to hear a single sound. The red-haired girl realizes her plan has completely failed. In her blurry vision, she sees the silhouette of the white-haired young man approaching. He used a confusion spell to silence all surrounding sounds. The duelist is startled as she's hit by a magic blow that sends her flying. With this, she realizes he predicted she would rely on her hearing and is surprised. Angrily, the noblewoman understands that he went easy on her in the first attack. The red-eyed young man floats a mana crystal as he prepares to fight. He then launches 2 energy projectiles that cut through the air at high speed. The redhead tries to defend herself with a magic shield, but is caught by surprise. She realizes he didn't aim at her, but around her to get closer. The mercenary runs towards her for close quarters combat. The duelist smiles and says that casting spells quickly is her specialty. She plans to use her spell first to end the fight at once, but the red-haired girl realizes her opponent is faster than her. With a powerful kick, he breaks the noblewoman's posture and moves in. The young man jumps and uses her shoulder as a support to leap backward. The young woman is confused by the commoner's fast and unexpected movement. Upon landing, the young man stomps his foot on the ground, releasing a purple energy. He manifests his magic with his toes, surprising everyone. The redhead tries to protect herself, but the electricity hits her head on. The elderly gentleman watches the scene, impressed by the young man's skill. He notes that the young man is from the wild school and that it's difficult to read his mana flow. Fallen on the ground, the noblewoman calls out to him and looks at him with a different expression. With a smile, she says he is quite intriguing and has caught her attention. The mercenary watches her in silence, waiting for her next move. The red-haired girl admits she underestimated him at first and thought he was a braggart. The two face each other in the battle arena, ready to continue the duel. She then thanks him for teaching her something so interesting. With a confident smile, the noblewoman thanks him for the lesson she received. Suddenly, she slips and falls to the ground after being hit by the electricity. The white-haired young man watches her with a cold, emotionless gaze. He then concentrates his purple energy for the final attack of the combat. The red-haired girl cries out in pain as she's hit by another electric shock. The young man leaps over her, preparing to finish the duel. With his red eyes glowing, he shows he's not messing around. The red-haired girl panics as the duel isn't over yet. Suddenly, the arena bell rings, indicating the end of the battle. The elderly gentleman rings the bell, ending the duel before anyone gets hurt further. The noblewoman runs over to the white-haired young man to find out what happened. He bows and says it was a good job, but she doesn't seem to have liked it. The duelist remains silent with a serious and irritated expression on her face. After the duel, the young woman is in a gazebo while a maid arranges her hair. She praises the young man, saying he is a skilled mage with incredible reflexes. The redhead asks if he's getting used to the world and praises his effort, but the mercenary explains that he had to work hard to survive as a mercenary. The noblewoman tells him to drop the humility and that the old master won't like him. The red-eyed young man watches the elderly gentleman reading a book from a distance. With that, the young woman says she learned a lot and will have a good result in the next duel. The white-haired young man encourages her, saying she doesn't need to worry. The duelist sips her tea and reveals that her true rival is someone else. A girl with dark hair and blue eyes appears in her thoughts. The noblewoman reveals she wants to defeat Iselin Eleanor Duplain, the sister of his former student. The mercenary hears the name in silence, remembering the noble family. After the conversation, the red-haired girl dismisses him and says he can leave now. The young man then walks away from the gazebo, leaving the noblewoman behind. The young woman sips her tea and thinks of the name Derek from the Beldern mercenaries. She has a feeling she's heard that name somewhere before. Suddenly, an image of Iselin appears in her mind, saying the young man's name. The duelist is shocked as she remembers where she knows that name from. The white-haired mercenary walks calmly through the streets of the noble district. Suddenly, someone grabs his arm forcefully, blocking his path. The red-haired girl holds him and looks at him with a serious, questioning gaze. The protagonist looks back at her with his red eyes, not understanding the situation. With a smile, she asks who he is, and if he was the mercenary who taught Diella. The sun sets on the horizon, illuminating the sky with shades of orange and pink. In a luxurious room, a fireplace is lit, illuminating the surroundings. The noblewoman says she will do whatever it takes to defeat her rival, Iceland. The white-haired young man is surprised to hear the Duplain Harris's name. The redhead explains that she wants to defeat her in the next magic duel at any cost. The mercenary comments that she is very competitive, and the young woman agrees. She then confesses that she has done pathetic things because of this rivalry. The red-eyed young man listens attentively to the noblewoman's story. She reveals that the jealousy she felt for Iceland was something dirty and despicable, but even after speaking ill of her, the Duplain Harris treated her with understanding. The young man remains silent and wonders why she is telling him all of this. With that, the redhead explains that she wants to show how serious she is about this. She also says she has a few questions to ask the mercenary. The protagonist allows her to continue, as it seems to be an important matter. The noblewoman wants to know how good Iceland really is, since he knows her well. She also asks how she compares to the Duplain Harris. The white-haired young man listens to the request with a serious and thoughtful look. With determination, the red-haired young woman asks what she needs to do to win. The mercenary looks at her in silence for a moment before answering. He acknowledges Iceland's miraculous talent, but says that she is also talented. With that, the young man suggests that she continue to hone her skills with dedication, but he sees in her eyes that she doesn't want empty compliments. He understands that she is desperate enough to ask a commoner for help. The conversation continues in the luxurious room, warmed by the fire from the hearth. The red-eyed young man remains silent, pondering what to say. Then he states with certainty that there's no way she can win. The red-haired girl looks at him with a serious and challenging gaze after his response. The white-haired young man keeps his gaze firm and direct on the noblewoman. She then smiles with a determined and unwavering look. The duelist says that even if it's impossible, she still wants to win. The mercenary watches her in silence, admiring her strong determination. The redhead remembers that he turned the spoiled Diela into a powerful mage. With that, she asks if he can't do the same for her so she can defeat Iceland. The white-haired young man is silent for a moment, thinking about the proposal. He says there are methods worth trying, but something worries him. The noblewoman crosses her arms and smiles, as she feels they are finally reaching an agreement. The mercenary then asks if she knows the exact method he used with Diela. He remembers when he terrorized the noble girl to teach her a lesson. With a dark smile, he recalls how he used fear to control her. The energy sword glowed as he threatened her so she would learn. The redhead admits she doesn't know the details, but is prepared for anything. The red-eyed young man then says that since he's a mercenary, he'll have his price. The noblewoman doesn't care about gossip and says she will pay whatever it takes. She is determined to become famous throughout the entire empire. If she can't become #1 in Everstein's social circle, her dream is useless. The duelist says there are more important things than her pride, and that he shouldn't doubt her. The protagonist looks at her in silence, observing her sincerity and determination. He then explains that since he's a mercenary, he's asking for a payment. The red-haired girl is speechless and surprised by the request. She gets embarrassed and blushes, as she didn't expect that. The young woman says she can pay whatever he wants, and that money is no object. The young man thinks that if she's being serious, he'll have to use an equally harsh method. In a garden, an angel statue watches the blue sky and the falling leaves. The Duplain Harris comments that the next meeting will have a magic duel segment. Other noblewomen gather and comment on the upcoming event. The dark-haired young woman says that Iceland is very humble about her skills. Suddenly, the redhead appears, and her rival greets her with a smile. The other girls comment that they were just talking about her, and the young woman approaches. They watch the interaction between the two and wonder if they should interrupt. The noblewoman then asks if Iceland has ever tasted defeat before. The Duplain Harris thanks her for the compliment, but says she can't be careless. The redhead says she is more confident, thanks to her new magic tutor. She reveals that she found the tutor on her own, not through Iceland. With a confident smile, the noblewoman prepares for the big reveal. The Duplain Harris is shocked to hear that the new tutor is Derek. The duelist mocks her rival's reaction and says that the man she lost is now hers. But the dark-haired young woman smiles and surprises everyone with her reaction. Iceland congratulates the redhead and says that she is wise and trustworthy in her choices. With a gentle smile, she congratulates the noblewoman once more on the hire. The red-haired young woman is left flustered and confused by the unexpected reaction. The Duplain Harris notices the awkwardness and tries to understand the situation. In a memory, Iceland suggests that to Ella ask the mercenary for extra lessons, but the blonde girl vehemently refuses and says she doesn't need any more help. The Duplain Harris watches the scene, thoughtful and worried about her sister. The redhead then realizes that Iceland knows she poached her tutor. With a triumphant smile, she prepares to provoke her rival even more, but the dark-haired young woman comments on the time and changes the subject. The noblewoman says goodbye, mentioning that she has her first tutoring session now. With a mischievous smile, she walks away, leaving her rival behind. The Duplain Harris thinks that the young man wouldn't do anything terrible to his new student. A white-haired girl sips her tea, watching the scene from afar. She thinks that everyone is just working hard to make a living. Back at the tavern, the guildmaster prepares for the next job. He comments on the Belmeard family and the protagonist's workload. The white-haired young man says he doesn't need to go to the count's estate. His chief then asks if the noblewoman will be able to defeat Iceland in the duel. The mercenary takes a sip of his drink and says there's still a way to win. He explains that if the redhead reaches the 2-star level, she'll have an advantage. The guild master carries a barrel and asks for a more realistic plan. The red-eyed young man says that was exactly what he wanted to tell him. With a serious look, he asks for his chief's help to put the plan into action. The white-haired young man says they will also need Pellin's help. The guild master is silent for a moment with the barrel on his back. He then realizes that the young man is planning something reckless and nonsensical. The mercenary admits that the plan is fundamentally dangerous. Suddenly, the doe's blonde friend appears, crying and screaming in despair. She complains that she was tricked and that they took all her money. The guild chief sighs and offers her a little money to help. Later, in a luxurious mansion, the noblewoman's training begins. The white-haired young man says the lessons will be in the form of real combat. He explains that he will repeat the exercise 10 times to analyze her magic. The mercenary reveals that he needs to observe her combat skills first. The redhead finds the method brutal, but says she didn't hire him for theoretical lessons. With that, he says they will begin the training, and a blue aura appears in his hand. After the combat, the arena is destroyed, and the noblewoman is out of breath. She leans on her knees, exhausted from the intense training. The young man congratulates her and tells her to rest for 10 minutes before they continue. The red-haired girl is astonished, as she doesn't have a single drop of mana left. But her tutor says she still has energy and must try harder. He then orders her to create 10 more ice lances because her form was incorrect. The young man questions what she's capable of if she can't even do that. Afterward, he orders her to fire 100 more magic arrows without giving her time to rest. The noblewoman collapses to the ground, exhausted, with no strength to continue the training. He congratulates her on her work and says she can go to dinner now. The mercenary asks if she is okay and says that giving up is an option, but the redhead gets up angrily and looks at him with a defiant gaze. She says the training was just hard work and nothing more. The duelist boasts that a light training session like that is nothing to her. The red-eyed young man looks at her and says that perhaps he underestimated her. She then declares that starting tomorrow, she will show her true abilities. With a confident smile, the noblewoman asks him to increase the training's intensity. The red-eyed young man questions her statement about tomorrow and asks what she meant. The noblewoman is confused by the question and doesn't understand her tutor's reaction. With a frightening look, he reveals that was just her dinner break. The two face each other in the training arena as night begins to fall on the horizon. The redhead tries to laugh, but the mercenary states that he didn't take this job to play around with her.